All right, these are our last 2 lessons before your test on Canvas tomorrow. We are working on lessons 8 and 9 today. Just like when we were working on adding and subtracting fractions, lesson 8 is modeling with hands-on drawing pictures, and then lesson 9 is doing the algorithm, just the math without models and pictures. So let's jump into lesson 8 and get started. We are going to read up here. You've learned to write a fraction as the sum of a unit fraction. For example, 4/5 is equal to 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5. You can also write a fraction as a multiple of a unit fraction. Build it. Write an equation to write 4/5 as a multiple of a unit fraction. So one way is to use fraction tiles. So we're going to model 4/5. So I'm going to need a 1/5 fraction tile. And I'm going to need 4 of them because my fraction is 4/5. They don't look very good. How many 1/5 tiles did I use? Well, I used 4. Another way is you can use repeated addition. Since I know that 4/5 is equal to 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5, how many times is 1/5 added to equal 4/5? 4 times. So thinking about it backwards, 4/5 is equal to 4 times 1/5. Because I needed 4 1/5 fraction tiles to make 4/5. So 4 times 1/5. We know that multiplication is just repeated addition. So 4 times 1/5 equals 4/5. You know that 6 is a multiple of 2. Any multiples of 6, such as 12, 18, and 24, are also multiples of 2. The same is true for fractions. A multiple of a fraction can also be written as a multiple of a unit fraction. So try it. Write an equation to write 2 times 4/5 as a multiple of a unit fraction. Use repeated addition to write 2 times 4/5 as 4/5 plus 4/5. Because we have 4/5 and we need to add it together twice. Now we can just add like fractions. 4/5 plus 4/5 equals 8/5. Model 8/5 using fraction tiles. So I need a fraction bar and I need to cut it into 5 pieces. My denominator tells me how many pieces, and I need to start coloring in 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not enough, so I need another fraction bar. 6, 7, 8. How many 1/5 tiles did I use? 8. So 8/5 is a multiple of 4/5. It's also a multiple of 1/5. 8/5 is equal to 8 times 1/5 because I needed 8 1/5 tiles. Write an equation showing that 8/5 is a multiple of a unit fraction 1/5. So 8/5 is equal to 8 times 1/5. So 2 times 4/5 is equal to 8 times 1/5. They're the same thing. 2 times 4/5 is the same thing as 2 and 4/5 is equal to 8 and times 1/5. They are written the same, different numbers, but the same answer. They are equivalent. Practice it. Write an equation to write each fraction or product as a multiple of a unit fraction. So the first thing I need to do is I need to draw my fraction tiles. For 3/4, I need to model that, so I'm going to draw a fraction bar. And I'm going to divide it into fourths. And I'm going to color 3 in. How many fraction tiles did I use? Well, I used 3 1/4 tiles. So 3 times 1/4 equals 3/4. For 7/8, I need a fraction bar. And I need to divide it into eighths because my denominator is 8. And I need to color 7 of them in. So how many 1/8 pieces did I use? 7 1/8. So 7 times 1/8 is equal to 7/8. Now, what do you notice about this? Before we move on to the next page, I want you to think about, what are you noticing? I'm noticing that this number times the numerator gives me the numerator of my answer. 7 times 1 equals 7/8. All right, remember that as we move on. Let's move on to lesson 9. Make sure you're doing these with me. Green. There we go. You can use models and equations to multiply a fraction by a whole number. So now we are multiplying fractions. You can do this 2 different ways. One way is to use repeated addition, and one way is to use models. So let's read example 1. Each card on a trivia game has 6 questions. Each question represents 1/6 of the questions on the card. Caleb correctly answered 4 of the questions. What fraction of the questions on a card did he answer correctly? So we are multiplying 4 times 1/6. The first way we can do this is with repeated addition. Our 4 tells us how many times we need to add 1/6. So we have 1/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6. And we know how to add like fractions. So 1/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6. We keep the denominator and we change the numerator and add them up. Now with 4/6, I can simplify that. And when I simplify a fraction, I find the greatest common factor and divide. So my factors of 4 are 1, 2, and 4. My factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. What's their greatest common factor? 2. So I need to take 4/6 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So simplified, my answer is 2/3. So 4 times 1/6 equals 2/3. Another way is you can use models. The number line shows the first 4 multiples of 1/6. So they have a number line and they divided it into 6 pieces and labeled them. And they went 1 times 1/6, 2 times 1/6, 3 times 1/6, 4 times 1/6, and we landed on 4/6. To check, you use fraction tiles. 4 times 1/6 equals 4/6, or remember we did 2/3 when we simplified it. So they drew out a fraction bar, divided it into 6 pieces, and colored in 1, 2, 3, 4, and got 4/6. You can use equations and properties to multiply a fraction by a whole number. Find 5 times 3/10. Identify 2 whole numbers between which the product lies. So there are a couple things we need to do. First, we need to think of 3/10 as a multiple of 1/10. If I break 3/10 up, I would get 1/10 plus 1/10 plus 1/10. So it's a multiple of 1/10. 5 times 3/10 is equal to 5 times 3 times 1/10. So now I can multiply my whole numbers, 5 times 3, and multiply by 1/10. I'm breaking up my equation and using the associative property. 15 times 1/10, and then 15/10. Well, then I have to turn that improper fraction into a mixed number and simplify. So 5 times 3/10 equals 1 and 1/2. A quick way is to just multiply these two numbers and leave your denominator the same. If I were to draw out a number line, 1 and 1/2 would be right in between 1 and 2. So the product lies between 1 and 2. Okay, we don't need to worry about all this because I'm not going to make you do this on the test or on the problem that we're doing next. All right? Multiply. Let's do it a couple different ways. We are on guided practice. Let's use repeated addition. So I have to add 1/8 how many times? 5, because I add it by whatever number we're multiplying by. So I have 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8. Now I know how to add like fractions. I keep the denominator the same and I add the numerator. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my answer is 5/8. Well, let's check and see if we need to simplify it. What are my factors of 5? 1 and 5. It's a prime number, so we're not going to be able to simplify 5 at all. So 5/8 is good to go. 4 times 2/3. We can multiply 4 times 2 and get 8/3. Well, that's an improper fraction, and I can't leave it that way. So I need to divide my improper fraction to make it a mixed number. I will have 8 divided by 3. 8 divided by 3, or 3 times what number gives me 8, or how many groups of 3 can I give into 8? There are 3 different ways we can think about division problems. Okay? 8 divided by 3, 3 times what number gives me 8, or how many groups of 3 can I put into 8? And the answer is 2. Now we multiply 2 times 3 to get 6. We subtract and have 2 left over, so our remainder, 2. Our quotient becomes our whole number. Our remainder becomes our numerator. And our divisor becomes our denominator. So our final answer is 2 and 2/3. All right, we talked about a lot of different ways that you can multiply. The easiest way, honestly, is to just do repeated addition. If you stick with repeated addition, you will be good to go. So let's jump down here to independent practice, and I'm going to do a couple for you, and then you can do the rest. All right, and check the answers with the answer key. But I just want to make sure we understand how to do this with just repeated addition. Okay, because it gives you a lot of other ways to do it, and if you just focus on one way, it's so much easier. Ignore all this. Oops, actually, you need this part. You do need to write it in simplest form. But you do not need to identify the whole numbers. That's too much for right now, especially with e-learning. We're just going to focus on multiplying. So 8 times 1/5. The fraction I'm working with is 1/5, and my whole number tells me how many times I need to add it together. So I would have 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2 more. 1/5 plus 1/5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, add my like fractions. I keep my denominator the same, and I add my numerators. 8. Well, that's an improper fraction, and that means it is not in simplest form, so I need to divide 8 divided by 5. Your numerator divided by your denominator. 8 divided by 5, how many groups of 5 can I put into 8, or 5 times what number gives me 8, or close to 8? 1 group. 1 times 5 is 5. Subtract, we have a remainder of 3. So our 1 becomes our whole number. Our remainder becomes our numerator. And our divisor becomes our denominator. So 1 3/5 is your final answer. Repeated addition and then write it in simplest form is the easiest way to do this. Okay, let's do number 5. 4 times 3/4. So I'm working with 3/4, and I need to add it 4 times. So I'm going to do 3/4 plus 3/4 plus 3/4. I know how to add like fractions. 4 stays the same, my denominator, and I add my numerator. 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 3 is 9. Now, that is an improper fraction, so I need to simplify it. I take my numerator and divide it by my denominator. 9 divided by 4 is 2, because 2 times 4 is 8, and that's as close to 9 as I can get. Multiply, subtract, and I have a remainder of 1. My numerator, or my quotient, becomes my whole number. My remainder becomes my numerator, and my divisor becomes my denominator, 2 1/4. Number 7, 11 times 2/8. So I'm working with 2/8, and I need to add it 11 times. 2/8. It's going to take me a while. 2/8, 2/8, 2/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I'm going to move over here, 11. There we go. Okay, adding like fractions, my denominator stays the same, and I add up my numerators. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. Improper fraction, so I need to take my numerator, divide it by my denominator. 22 divided by 8, or how many groups of 8 get me close to 22? Think about it. 8, 16, 24. I can't go all the way to 24, so I have to stop at 16, which is 2. 2 times 8 is 16. 22 minus 16 is 6. So I have a remainder of 6. My quotient becomes my whole number. My remainder becomes my numerator. And my divisor becomes my denominator. So your final answer is 2 6/8. Now, number 9, let's use our trick. Let's just multiply our numerator by the number, our whole number. 5 times 2. What is it? 10. And put it over our denominator, 10/3. Well, let's divide because we cannot have an improper fraction. So our numerator we divide our numerator by our denominator. 10 divided by 3. 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1, so I have a remainder of 1. So I would write this as 3 1/3. Now let's make sure that actually works. I'm going to erase some of this stuff. Let's make sure that actually works to just multiply that way. Make sure Miss Folk's not just tricking you. All right, if we look at this, it wants us to multiply 5 times 2/3. So let's use repeated addition to check. 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 2/3 plus 2/3. Okay? Keep your denominator the same and add your numerators. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Look at that, 10/3 and 10/3. And I bet if you divide it, you're going to end up with this same answer. So you can use repeated addition, or you can use this trick where you multiply the numerator by your whole number. All right, if it wants you to show your work, use repeated addition, but you have to write it in simplest form. I want you to do 4, 6, 8, and 10, the even ones, on your own, and I will post the answer key on Canvas. Make sure tomorrow you take the assessment over what we learned this week on Canvas, and then I will see you on Monday for our next math lesson.